Hello students, welcome back to class 12 business studies. Today we are going to discuss chapter 12, the last chapter of our business studies, that is consumer protection. In this chapter we are going to learn concept and importance of consumer protection, Consumer Protection Act 1986, meaning of a consumer, rights and responsibility of consumers, who can file a complaint, redressal machinery, remedies available, consumer awareness, role of a consumers organization and non-governmental organization. In our today's video lecture, we are going to discuss the meaning and importance of consumer protection. Before we start with the meaning of consumer protection, we must first understand who's the consumer. In simple language, consumer is a person who purchases the goods or avails services from a manufacturer or a service provider for their personal consumption, personal use, rather than purchasing it for commercial purpose or reselling purpose. Manufacturer or a seller offers goods to fulfill the needs and wants of its consumers in order to increase their profit, market share, and sales volume. According to Consumer Protection Act 1986, definition of consumer is any person who buys any goods for a consideration. It includes any user of such goods with the approval of the buyer, but it does not include a person who obtains goods for resale or any commercial purpose. What do you mean by that? It means that any person is a consumer who purchases any goods from a manufacturer or a seller for a consideration. Consideration means like cash or paying anything in return. Consumer also includes such person who uses the product, who uses the goods only when it is approved by the buyer, only when it is agreed by the buyer to be used. But consumer is not considered such persons who obtains the good, who purchases the goods only to resell it to another customer. I will explain this meaning through an example. If Miss Tenzin Doma purchases goods from Mr. Ngutuk Dorje, the seller, and pays rupees 500 in return, then Tenzin Doma is a consumer and 500 rupees is consideration. If Tenzin Doma gives the goods to her younger sister, Tenzin Sangmo, then Tenzin Sangmo will be the consumer because she's using the goods after the approval from her sister, from the buyer. If Mr. Kamasunam, a restaurant owner, purchases goods from Mr. Ngutuk Doje for a consideration, but not for his personal use, rather it will be used in his restaurant, then Mr. Kamasonam will not be considered as consumer. Same goes for services. Any person who avails any type of service for a consideration, cash, kind, anything in return. It includes any beneficiary, a person who derives advantages of such services after the approval from the buyer. But it does not include a person who hires such service for resale purpose, for any commercial purpose. In marketing concept, a consumer is said to be a king in a free market. Gone were the days when caveat emptor approach was applicable, which means let the buyer beware, which has now been changed to caveat vendita, which means let the seller beware. Even though consumer is considered as king, but in actual they are the ones getting exploited in n number of ways by producers and sellers. In this growing modern competitive market, producers and sellers, in order to increase their profits, enhance their sales, capture market share, they tend to engage in unfair trade practices like providing defective goods, unsafe products, spurious products which looks like original products but actually they are fake, adulterated products, impure products, showing false and misleading advertisements, hoarding and black marketing, etc. Therefore, consumer protection is necessary. Now, let us understand the meaning of consumer protection. Consumer protection means protecting the consumers or buyers of goods and services against anti-trade, unfair malpractices like defective, unsafe, dangerous goods, adulteration, deceiving advertisements, black marketing, etc. Consumer protection aims to solve the grievances of consumers speedily and inexpensively. Consumer protection also includes educating the consumers about their rights and responsibilities. Let's understand the concept of consumer protection with the help of Mr. Rajesh Sakre's case against India's largest bank, SBI. Mr. Rajesh is a tea vendor. He studied till class 5. Mr. Rajesh had rupees 20,000 in his bank account, out of which he withdrew rupees 10,800. In 2011, he visited the ATM again to withdraw the remaining amount, that is rupees 9,200. He realized it was missing from his bank account. So he went to register a complaint to one of the bank's branches, but officers over there ignored his plea. He then made an appeal to the bank's Mumbai headquarters. There also it did not work out. So ultimately, at last he had to file a case in the District Consumer Disputes Redressal Forum against SBI. Bank insisted that it was Mr. Sakre who had withdrawn the amount, the remaining amount, but they could not produce any proof like CCTV footage to claim that it's true. So after a lot of court appearances, Mr. Sakre won the battle. Mr. Sakre won the case against SBI. On June 16, the Consumer Court ruled in his favor and ordered the SBI to return rupees 9,200 with 6% interest within 2 months. In addition to this, bank also has to pay rupees 10,000 for the mental suffering and another rupees 2,000 for legal expenses. With this case, we could see that any consumer or buyers of goods and services have the rights to raise their voice and seek redressal against any kind of malpractices by producers, sellers, or service providers under the Consumer Protection Act 1986. On 15th April 1986, Consumer Protection Act was introduced in India in order to tackle and protect the consumers from dangerous products, adulterated products, deceptive advertisements, unethical and unfair trade practices. So now let's understand why consumer protection is important for consumers. Our first point is consumer ignorance. Many consumers are ignorant about their rights and reliefs available to them. which will result in consumer exploitation. That's why consumer protection is important, because it will educate the consumers about rights and reliefs available to them, which will ultimately save them from exploitation. Our second point is unorganized consumers. It will be difficult for a single consumer to raise a voice against unethical, unfair trade practices. Instead, many consumers can unify and form a consumer association and collectively fight the battle against unethical and unfair trade practices. Next, we have widespread exploitation of consumers. Consumers needs to be protected against widespread unjust trade practices like defective products, dangerous products, adulterated products, etc. Next, we have significance of consumer protection from business point of view. Why consumer protection is necessary for a businessman too. Our first point is long-term business interests. Producers and sellers providing safe, quality products, fair pricing will satisfy the consumers, and it may eventually create good image of the company in the society. Satisfied consumers will lead to repeated sales and increase in market share. So if business wants to increase their customer base and stay in the business line market for a longer period of time, then they have to satisfy the consumers by following fair trade practices. Our second point is moral justification, moral justice. Businesses should look after the interest of consumers by avoiding or preventing any sort of unfair trade practices, exploitations. It is their moral duty to practice ethics while conducting business activities. Our third point is business uses resources of society. Resources that are used in the business comes from a society. So it is their responsibility to serve the society by supplying quality products. Next, we have social responsibility. A business has responsibilities towards various stakeholders like owners, workers, government, customers, etc. Customers plays a significant part in the business because business earns money, revenue by selling goods and services to the customers. So the interest of customers must be taken care by the business. Our last importance of consumer protection from business point of view is government intervention. Businesses that are engaging in wrong practices will give an invitation to government intervention, government interference in the business activities, which will send a bad image and position of the company among the society. So that's why businesses must avoid any form of unfair trade practices at all costs in order to avoid government intervention.